All right. Hello, hello, everyone. We hope that you all are doing safe and well. So glad to have you with us today. We are so grateful and thankful that you are here with us today. We understand that imperialist capitalist media may have drawn your attention elsewhere. So if you are able to choose to be here instead of somewhere else, we appreciate you. We promise that this is going to be well worth your time and then some. Not only are you going to grow ideologically, but it's possible that we can also grow collectively by being here today. I am getting some internet unstable messages, so I just hope that you all can bear with me. And I'll be monitoring the chat if I need to repeat things or say things more slowly. I know that having my camera on does not help, but I also want you all to see my face as I'm explaining my time in Matanzas as well as Havana, Cuba. And so, because of that, we're just going to do the best we can. And like I said, my Zoom people, if you all can let me know if things are not coming in clear, I'll try to adjust as I need to. Appreciate you all being with us. And let's start by acknowledging our comrades of indigeneity descent of the Western Hemisphere, because without them, we would not be here, quite literally, because this is their land. So, all the way from the very top of Canada, all the way to the very bottom of Chile, we acknowledge that being indigenous land. And I personally am so thankful to have that land acknowledgement, not only for our indigenous comrades, but because it's important to undo the propaganda and to undo the lies that have been taught to us. And part of that is acknowledging whether or not somebody's land is actually who they say it is, right? And so we honor our indigenous people. We thank them for allowing us to continue to be here after all these years. And we hope that they know not only is the All African People's Revolutionary Party behind them in their fight for getting their land and justice and freedom back, but we also appreciate them for having our back and being on the forefront with us so that African people can get our land and our justice and our freedom back as well. And we understand that, teaming up with the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, it also means that we'll be able to help other colonized people and other oppressed people get their justice and, in some cases, their land back, right? And to get their freedom back as well. So we are thankful to them so much. We also would be remiss if we did not honor our African ancestors, for which without them, we would not be here today. I believe she is still on her way, but I just wanted to give a very quick shout out to both of my parents, for which without them, I would not be here. And especially my mom, because today is her birthday. And so, as I share my trip to Cuba with you all, I just want to start by acknowledging the incredible amount of privilege that I have, where I have two parents that not only encouraged me to go, but they supported me in their own respective ways so that I could go. And if my mom is able to come today, I hope that she'll be able to hear me say happy birthday to her, because obviously, had she not been born, then a different type of Shukura would be speaking to you right now. And we'll never know who that person would have been, because that's not who I am, right? But I am the people that they have raised me to be. And the people that they have raised me to be are following in their footsteps, because both of them went to Cuba, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that and continue to give thanks for being in their footsteps and also having the foundation that they have instilled in me, exciting me and informing me and reminding me that this is important and that this is worth the trip and that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Not everybody will have a chance to go to Cuba more than once. And I'm so thankful that I can at least say I've been once. I hope that that number will increase, but I'm also really thankful for the privilege and the opportunity, right? So we just have to acknowledge that and be able to acknowledge the grounds that we stand on. So we are so thankful that you are here with us today for our ancestors' voices. We want to start by acknowledging, for those that are new, this is your first time with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so happy you're here with us. Our Ancestors' Voices is a weekly broadcast that is brought to you live streamed via YouTube, Facebook, as well as Zoom. And it is brought to you by an organization by the name of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This is a mass independent organization that is based out of Africa. A lot of times, as African people who are not in organizations, it's easy for us to get confused about where our problems began. It's easy for us to claim other identities. This is why you have Africans saying that they are indigenous, because they do not know who they really are. And a lot of that has to do with lack of political education. But a bigger part of that has to do with not having a sense of identity because of colonization, because of imperialism, but also because of not having a collective identity. If you are in an organization that promotes your identity and allows you to be who you are, then you might not be refuting that identity as much. You may not be suppressing it. You may not be silencing it as much if you know that you can just be who you say you are, right? And so, because of that, we need to be thinking about just how special that is, that some of us are aware of that already. Some of us haven't come to that realization yet, but some of us have already become very well aware of that. And this is why we're in these organizations that are doing this work to achieve better outcomes for the oppressed people, right? So the All African People's Revolutionary Party is a mass independent organization. And like I said, our problems did not start in the diaspora. Uh-oh, so it already looks like I'm freezing up. I'm trying to be mindful of that. Our problems did not start in the diaspora. They started on the continent. So this is why our organization is based on the continent, because we acknowledge that the problems need to be addressed from the root, quite literally, where they started, right? It was Marcus Garvey who said, a tree without roots is like a person with no identity, right? And so that was a rough paraphrase, but it was actually pretty good off of memory too, because I've always loved that quote, but I haven't used it lately. So I need to bring that back into the fold. So just keeping that in mind and thinking about that and understanding where that base is from. Mass independent also meaning that our members fund this organization, and because of them, we are able to have the encrumus, terreus, cabralis identity that we have, because we don't have to worry about somebody else giving us money and then telling us how to think, right? And so just making sure to make those connections and helping us to understand that. Why is the All African People's Revolutionary Party in existence? Well, we exist because we believe in one Pan-African socialist Africa. We believe in Pan-Africanism, which is defined as one unified socialist Africa. And we believe that if Africa is to unite and if the problems that we are facing are to be addressed, then part of that is no more division within the continent, but instead a United States of Africa, or what Kwame Nkrumah used to call the USA, right? And so we believe in that as well. And that makes sense because Kwame Nkrumah was one of our founding members who started this organization, right? So in doing that work of Pan-Africanism, we can use the book that you see at the bottom of the slide, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, as it kind of streamlines and lays out step by step how a person would go about creating an organization that is mass independent and centered around helping African folks or African descent folks, right? And then last but not least, our Ancestors' Voices is hosted every week by Baba Ajamu Umi, who is a longtime organizer with the party, going past 40 plus years in terms of his organizing legacy. And I am also an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Friday was my 6-year anniversary. Very proud of that. Very, very proud of that. And so, yeah, we are excited to bring this information to you each week. We are a family. Baba Ajamu is my dad, and we're really happy to use our time constructively in this way. So I thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope that you can buckle up because this is going to be a really important ride. And I also want you to remember that if you were not able to join us 2 weeks ago, this is actually my part 2. And I have broken this segment into 3 parts. Okay. So this is my part 2. Next week, I'll be doing part 3. If you have not been able to watch part 1, we would suggest that you go back to our YouTube page where you can see all the latest seminars that we have done. And if you go back to, I believe it was January 29th was the date, Sunday the 29th, then you can, excuse me, see my very first installment of this series of Cuba, my report back part one. I would recommend that you watch them in order, but it also is not necessarily based on that, but I think it'll just make more sense because the other part of it is you first need to understand what imperialism means. You need to understand what capitalism means. You need to understand the difference between an embargo and a blockade. And I talked about all of that in part one, as well as why Cuba is in the predicament that it's in, and also why it's now under attack because Venezuela is vulnerable, right? So we talked about all that in part one. And so I do think it would be useful for you to watch them in order. However, there's no like necessary part of that because we'll still be talking about the blockade today. We'll be talking about imperialism as well today. And so just making those connections too. All right. So I will start with saying that I went on this trip to Cuba with the Venceremos Brigade. This is a long time organizing this is a long time organizing entity that was established shortly after the blockade was implemented on Cuban soil as a way to help bring people from the United States to Cuba so they could see for themselves what exactly was happening, how the blockade was impacting Cuban people, all the ins and the outs that people had to sacrifice and go through because of the blockade, with ways of increasing political education among people in the US and helping people in the US to understand just how much their privilege was to be factored in, but also how much they could help and change the outcomes for the Cuban people, right? Based on that privilege that is instilled, right? So we didn't necessarily, this particular brigade did not necessarily take us on a tour to a medical facility. I realized that they have to organize the brigades based on the time of year and what's happening. So this particular brigade was in December, and we did a lot of celebrating centered around the Cuban Revolution, centered around the Haitian Revolution. And we also made some connections with other entities within the island, but we didn't go to a medical facility because that's not the brigade for that. If I wanted to do that, I learned quickly that I would have needed to go on the brigade in May. And so what I really loved about this whole process was we had constant opportunities to give feedback and to share just thoughts that we had overall about how the brigade was going, ways to make it better, and also opportunities for us to be anti-liberal and to take responsibility. I said to you all in part one that we had to move as a unit and move collectively. And that was very much explicitly laid out from the moment that we woke up on the morning of the 26th of December to go to the Miami airport. We traveled as a unit. We fit as many people on the shuttle as we could. We organized the subgroups, and it was shuttle after shuttle after shuttle, and all 40 of us made it. And then we got in line together, and we all were checking in our bags together. We waited, of course, until everybody had their bags checked. We waited, of course, until everybody had their boarding passes. And then we walked to the food area in the airport together, and we waited a moment for people to get their food and to eat. And then we walked to our gate. And even then, we collectively went to get water and fill up our water bottles and all these things. And I'm trying to paint this picture for you all to understand, like, it would not have been revolutionary for me to just find this medical facility on my own, even though my background is public health and I would have loved to see it. That wasn't revolutionary. That's individualistic. And I'm trying to paint this picture so you all can see just how detrimental being individualistic can actually be if you allow it to consume you. It really doesn't help the fuller, larger picture at large. And it also is selfish because that wasn't the purpose of this brigade. I do wish I had known that before I went, but that's okay. I still had an opportunity to ask questions about the medical system. I still had an opportunity to go to a mental health facility, still had an opportunity to go to a mental health facility that was also a food pantry that fed elderly Cubans each morning around the clock. So there were still some medical pieces embedded in that. And of course, like, I want to talk to you all about it because it's important for us to kind of understand like how all of this is breaking down, right? So in 1999, due to the Cuban government, they wanted to make sure that students had the opportunity to be trained from around the world to receive a particular type of medical education from people who are coming from Latin America, people who are coming from the Caribbean, people who are coming from Africa, because those particular areas were more likely to need help in terms of having stark health disparities. And so they wanted to target those areas as a way for people to consider maybe being a medical provider of some type, and then giving them a bridge to be able to become educated to do just that. So you see on your screen that we have the Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina, aka the Latin School of Medicine, or what a lot of people on the island refer to as ILAM, right? And so it was really interesting to me because they really did target people from everywhere. And I want to point this out. ILAM has been helping medical students around the world for decades. And I do mean decades. And what's really important to note about their particular way of how they train the students is not only do they give them different opportunities to have access to different subspecialties and different, residencies and things like that, but they're also asking these students who are coming to receive a free education, by the way, because there's not a large amount of tuition for medical school that they have to pay. And I know you're thinking, well, that's because they're Cuban. No, if you and I wanted to become doctors tomorrow, we could buy a flight, we could fly to Havana. Well, we'd have to apply, of course, but we would apply and then we would buy a flight, we'd fly to Havana, and we'd start medical school this fall. And we'd be doctors. Like, how cool is that? And we spend no money, you all. You know why? Because Cuba doesn't want to limit the medical information that needs to get out to the world. Cuba wants to get it out in the thousands, and they want to multiply it. They want to get it out to as many people as possible because they understand that the way they're teaching medicine, not from a capitalist perspective, but the way they're teaching medicine from a humanist perspective, is very much missing in the medical formula today. It is very much missing in the medical bedside today. It is very much missing in how people receive care. And if you don't agree with me, then why do social scientists research medical racism? Why do they research bedside manner racism? Like, those are actual things from anthropological journals and from public health journals. Those are actual concepts that have been researched in more and more detail. So if those things don't need to exist, then why do they? They exist because people are being oppressed because of their class status. When they go seek medical care, they're being oppressed because of their age. They're being oppressed because of their gender. They're being oppressed because of their race. They might even be oppressed because of their pronouns and their preferred sexuality. Like, there's so many reasons why people don't even go to the doctor. And you all know I'm telling you the truth, because what's the point? What's the point? You're not going to respect me when I walk to you speaking another language. You're going to talk to the translator instead of talking to me. Okay. You're not going to value me when I tell you what's wrong with me, because you're going to mansplain stuff to me because I'm a woman identifying person. Okay. You're going to discount me if I'm coming in seeking treatment and care because I'm a sickle cell warrior. And you're going to assume that I'm drug seeking because that's the embedded racism. Okay. Somebody is out there listening, because I just saw somebody put a comment in the chat. So somebody is with me right now. So like that's the experience in the US, okay? That is the experience. So Cuba is not trying to duplicate that by any means, which is why they've taken a very revolutionary approach with how they teach students medicine, because they understand that people deserve to be seen and heard when they're in a vulnerable state seeking care and trying to take care of their health. We don't need to stress them out more, and Cuba understands that. Not only do they offer free education for medical students, but they don't hold you captive once you graduate. They encourage you to go back and to share what you learned with your respected country, with your respected city, community, neighborhood, municipal, province, whatever. So, like, this is really important to understand this. And I'll just say really quickly, just to give you some statistics, since 2001, almost 300 United States citizens have received full scholarships to study at ILAM. Awards of this scholarship come with only one condition. The medical graduates are required to return and service their communities, prioritizing the most underserved and under-resourced populations. The U.S. ELAM graduates are working in over 30 states across this country right now. Medical students who graduated from ELAM are working right here in the U.S. So the next time you're going shopping for a doctor, you should ask them, where'd you graduate? You'd be surprised if you can compare their kind of bedside manner to maybe the bedside manner of someone else who maybe went to Boston Medical College. That would be very different, right? We also just want to remind you all quickly, and you can see, of course, the image of the school on the slide, but I also want to highlight for you that this is such a big phenomenon that researchers are getting ahead of it to the point where they have conducted research around Elam. So you see the screenshot of even a scholarship article that has been written from a scholarly journal where people are doing this research, you all, because it's a phenomenon that we need to get behind, right? We've reminded you, but we'll say it again, like this is why cervical cancer doesn't exist in Cuba. This is why HIV doesn't exist in Cuba. It's also why syphilis and maternal mortality does not exist in Cuba. And you have to ask yourself why. Because they go through every single step to prevent things from getting worse than what they already are. There are so many things to think about, but I will start with helping you to understand that we have they in Cuba, they have made it clear that every individual has a social and a medical responsibility. And what I mean by that is they understand that they have to take certain precautions to make sure that not only do they keep one another safe, but they keep themselves safe. So unlike here, there, the social and the medical responsibility is that if you are feeling sick, don't go to work because it's bigger than you. If you get other people sick, that affects the economy because that's more people who are calling out, and their economy sustains all of them. So they can't afford to mess with that economy. It's not like here where people are self-centered and selfish and they have a tickle in their throat and they still go because they have bills to pay. It's the different mentality. And I'm trying to break this down so you all can see like exactly how this is streamlined and how it's a fact, right? So just kind of thinking about that, we have to really, really break that down and see that. Um, okay. Somebody just put in the chat that they don't see the slide. Oh, okay. You said never mind. Thank you. All right, cool. All right. And then the other thing we want to highlight is when we came on this brigade, you all, they asked us to bring another bag. So when I left Sacramento, I had 2 bags that I checked in. But when I came back, I had 1 bag. That's important to note because we had the intention of taking a supplemental bag. Uh-oh, I'm freezing up again. Okay, we had the intention of taking a supplemental bag of material aid, and then we left it there. And I cannot tell you how good that felt. As a matter of fact, my bag got picked to be given to the Casa de Africana, which was one of the African museums that we went to while we were there. Okay. Like, how cool is that? And so I can talk to you more about the fact that my family members helped to chip in and offered office supplies. I have family members that, of course, sent money. You all, some of my donors, you all sent money, and I was able to buy Band-Aids. I was able to buy toothbrushes, toothpaste, just things like that. I had several Band-Aids. I also had office supplies such as whiteout. I had paper clips. I had binder clips. I had push pins, just different things like that. I took a ream of office paper with me because printing paper was a big necessity while we were there. And then the first night that we were there in Miami, one of the other brigadistas asked if we would all be willing to donate towards getting a ink carton that was probably about I want to say she said it was like $80. So I donated $20 towards that. And they needed that ink for the clinic that we went to, the mental health clinic, excuse me, that we went to, because they couldn't print out what they needed to print out for the patients, right? So again, like I'm just trying to help you all see, like this blockade has ruined everything because they can't even get ink to print out the patient summary for the patients when they're leaving. And I don't know how many of you take that seriously, but for me, I read my patient summary up and down because I'm trying to pay attention, A, to what you want me to do by the time we have our next visit. And B, you're saying so much to me so fast because you're rushing to get me out of there because capitalism has taught you that you need to move, and get people in and out quick, so you can make that money, make that dollar, make that money, make that dollar, right? So I can't remember everything you said to me. And that's why the patient summary is so important. So if people don't have ink to print that out, oh, I froze up. If people don't have ink to print that out, you can see how that would be a problem, right? And I think even there, obviously they're not rushing to get people in and out, but sometimes it's still information overload. Sometimes it's still overwhelming. So it's important to note that, right? Okay, so even with the defeat of imperialism and the blockade, I want to remind you all, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but I want to remind you all some of the huge medical interventions that Cuba has offered was the Operation Miracle, which provided free eye surgeries to millions in 34 countries across Latin America and in Africa. This is also pretty cool and ironic because we passed a optometry school almost every day when we were heading back to the place that we were staying at. And I thought that was so cool just to see how that was a part of the community. It wasn't, excuse me, like this separate entity and people didn't have to travel, so and so kilometers to get to it. It was just right there and people could walk up from that centralized part of town and go to their classes and, prepare for their midterms and do what they needed to do. So I thought that was really cool. It's also not surprising to me that Operation Miracle was so successful because of the kind of support that they have when it comes to receiving eye care and even, the materials they need to create frames and things like that. Disaster relief dispatched medical brigades to respond to natural disasters like the 2010 Haiti earthquake, the 2005 Kashmir earthquake in Pakistan, as well as the 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa, right? And again, I remind you, when Hurricane Katrina took place in 2005, Cuba offered to help and the United States declined. And I think it's really important to mention that. Really important to mention that. Clearly, Hurricane Katrina was disastrous and people needed help, right? So that's just important to mention. Okay. All right. And then I also just want to remind you all, even with the COVID-19 pandemic, Cuba sent medical teams to help other countries during that pandemic. And we also want to remember and note that Cuba also was one of the first before Pfizer, before Moderna, before Johnson and Johnson. Cuba was the first to come up with an antiviral treatment option to address the COVID-19 transmission virus. Cuba came up with that. And they had antiviral treatments to share with everyone. They tried to share it with the United States. The US said no. Again, I want you to go back to that time. Maybe you've blocked it out. I haven't. Because I'm a public health practitioner. I can't help but think about all of those people who died. Just think if they had been able to get their hands on it, maybe their condition wouldn't have been as bad. I'm not saying that the antiviral treatment would have prevented them from dying. We don't know because we would have never been able to collect that data. What I'm saying is that there is a better chance that it would have prevented their conditions from being as worse as they were. That's what I'm saying, to the point where maybe they could have still have found a way to live with it instead of their life not being here anymore. So like these are the things, you all. And it's crazy to me that Cuba had access to this kind of stuff, but they did not hold it for themselves because they've never been about that life. They've always wanted to share everything that they have ever had. They have always wanted to share. So just reminding you all, the green QR code that you see, okay, I'm freezing up. The green QR code that you see at the bottom, this takes you directly to the Venceremos funding donation page. Please make sure you click on this QR code so that you can donate to them. The money that you are helping them to raise is going towards future brigades. It's also going towards a scholarship fund because not everybody is able to pay the full amount to go on these trips. And as I just said to you, the whole purpose of the VB is to get more people from the US to travel to Cuba, okay? So whether you're going in May for the Queer Brigade, whether you're going in December for the African Indigenous Palestinian Brigade, like it does not matter. We all need to get over there and see for ourselves what this experience is like. So help us by doing that and please support the Venceremos Brigade. Okay, and then I just want to highlight, this is also important to note, so important, so important, but it's also interesting that in every province or municipal, there is a doctor and there's also a clinic. That's really, really important to mention. So when you talk about hospital deserts, that's not a thing in Cuba. When you talk about the nearest hospital being 45 minutes from where you live, like people in Tuskegee driving all the way to Montgomery, Alabama, that's not an issue in Cuba. For every province or municipal, there is a clinic on the corner and there is a doctor that they can go and seek care for. I just think that's amazing. And I hope you do too. I also want to point out that even though this is a medical slide, I put this image here because I want you all to see just how normalized it is for people to idolize and to support Fidel Castro, as well as Ernesto Che Guevara. And we will see some pictures of Che very soon. But I just want to highlight for you all, like those images were everywhere in the island. They were everywhere. People were wearing Fidel shirts. They had Che hats. They had flags. They had flags in their yard that represented the first time that Fidel went after and tried to take down Fulgencio Batista on July 26th. Like they had all these different representations of that. And I'm just asking you to think carefully about that. If what you've heard about Fidel is so bad, if what you've heard about communism is so bad, even though we haven't seen communism yet, so it's interesting to me that we're critiquing something and we've never seen it happen. So I don't know how we can critique it, but okay. Even though we've never seen these things and we speak so badly about Ernesto Che Guevara, then why is the island celebrating them so much? Why are they everywhere on the island? Why are people buying t-shirts with their faces on it? Why are people buying hats with their faces on it? Why would people be saying the chants that Fidel used to say? If he was such a bad person, why? You have to ask yourself that because it was beautiful to me to see it. Literally, they had statues, not statues, that's not the right word. They had sculptures. Nope, that's still not the right word. They had metal artistic representation. There we go. Of Ernesto on one building and Fidel on another building. And the buildings were side by side next to each other. And these buildings had to be, you know, at least I would say, I don't know, 30, 35 floors high. Like it was a pretty high building, right? So you have to ask yourself, they would have taken that down by now, right? They wouldn't have left that up all these years. They would have taken that down by now. So that's the question, you all. That's the question, right? Okay, so let's move on to education. So we start with acknowledging the image on the far left. One of the first things we did when we got there, you all, was we were invited to visit a school twice. The first time we went to this school, we divided up our tasks. Some of us were in charge of cleaning, and I mean like cleaning the floor. So we had like soapy water and we had brooms and mops, and we were literally cleaning the stones on the floor. You can see the stairs are made out of cement, but we were cleaning them, right? To make sure that they didn't have extra dirt and grime that was unnecessary. We wiped down the handrails so that the handrails were clean when the students came back from winter break. There was another group of us that was in charge of creating a concept of a mural that represented our brigade coming to this school site. So the image you see on the left is some of the painters who were painting that mural while some of us were cleaning the floors. And then the third group of us were tending to the garden. And we were, you know, doing the things that needed to be done for a garden refresh. So people were retooling the soil and they were, you know, not carving out spaces. They were creating spaces for people to drop seeds and to help those seeds grow in a more, you know, retoiled surfaced environment for the soil and all that stuff. So it was really cool to be there and to be able to have that experience. And I'll say, when we first got there, there was a children's dance group that was there to welcome us. And so we got off the bus and we all walked onto the school ground, and the children were there waiting, and they were in their beautiful costumes and they were smiling. And we just stood there, and then they started the music and they started dancing. And, you know, it was beautiful and it was humbling and it was gracious. And I felt so welcomed. And it was crazy to me how I was in their space, but they wanted to welcome us. And it was just like, you just won't experience that unless you leave the US. You won't. You won't. You won't experience it unless you leave. You just won't. Like even now, I'm holding back tears because that was just so humbling to me. Like that was their winter break. They didn't have to come and welcome us on their winter break. How many of you would have sacrificed your winter break to go speak to somebody else that you didn't even know from another country? Like who does that, right? Who is teaching their kids to do that? Cubans. Cubans do that. Cubans are teaching their kids to do that, right? So we just have to think about that. It's a very different cultural exchange, but just cultural experience. It's very different, very, very different. And it was beautiful. Also, I'll just say this about the mural. It was also a collective idea. because everything is collective, right? It was a collective idea. So it wasn't one artist, you all. It was several artists who met before we left for the brigade, and they had this collective idea that they came up with. And so I just thought that was really, really cool. I was really happy to be one of the cleaners. So I was really scrubbing those steps. I was wiping down the handrails. We were singing and talking and laughing while we were cleaning up. I felt really good. They had gloves and all kinds of stuff, but it just felt good to touch the rags myself and to just really get in there and clean, because I was just thinking about how my elbow grease maybe was translated from my ancestors and how they were trying to clean spaces. You know, when you clean spaces, you know, there's an African belief that you're cleaning out old energy. I was very much harvesting that, very much harnessing and harvesting that. And I wanted to make sure that it was good for the kids when they came back. I wanted them to feel happy and welcomed, and I wanted them to feel appreciated so they could come back to a school that they felt represented what they deserved, right? As I said, we went to the school twice. So the first time we went, we cleaned, we worked on the mural, and we worked in the garden. The second time we came back, they were able to finish up the mural. They also did some work in the garden, and then we also repainted and painted. So some of the stairs that you see in the image, they are the natural stone color, but they had that light blue that you see in the back past the painters. We were able to take some of that paint and we painted the front steps to the point where it was beautiful because it was such a pop of color that you just notice it right away. We were able to repaint the walls because they already had that blue, but they needed to be touched up. And even that was humbling. And it was hot. And I was wearing work clothes. I wasn't wearing like cool breezy clothes. So I was sweating. It was not a good day. That was one of the days that we went back and the water was not on. So not only could I not take a hot shower, but I couldn't take a shower at all. The water pressure was completely shot. And again, every time that happened, I was thinking about senators and I was thinking about governors and other people who enforced the blockade so that people in Cuba don't have consistent electricity, which affects their water supply because their water supply is connected to the electrical grid, and the electrical grid also would go out periodically, which is why they have rolling blackouts there. Again, I'm just trying to make this connection for all of us to see. So it's not, oh, Cuba is poor. They don't even have water. If only it were that simple, because that's not accurate and it's not true. That's not what it is at all. And also you have to ask yourself, why are they limited on so many resources? Because of the blockade. That's not them. They didn't ask to not have aspirin. They don't want to ask me to bring them aspirin from California. I shouldn't have to bring them aspirin. They should be able to have access to get it. The blockade has stopped them from getting aspirin, you all. Tylenol, something that you see on the floor when you go to the movie theater. These people are searching high and low for it because they don't have access to it. That's really important to acknowledge. So important. All right. And then the last thing I'll say is the second time we went to the school, we went there on a Friday. And I remembered them saying that the children were coming back Monday. And that just made me so happy to know that that paint would be fresh. They would be able to see the mural completed. And it would just be a beautiful experience for them, especially because they had come to welcome us. And I was hoping that the work we had done would allow them to feel welcomed when they came back, right? Okay. I also want to acknowledge from an educational standpoint, and please note that QR code there as well. I also want to acknowledge from an educational standpoint, sorry, I'll just talk about these pictures real quick. So we also had several events, you all, with one of our hosting organizations, ICAP. I'll talk a lot more about them in part 3, but they had several different events. They had a like an awards ceremony where they acknowledged the work of ICAP and working with the Venceremos Brigade and why they had been working so hard to bring so many people over to Cuba. But they also had an opportunity where all of the brigades came together under ICAP. We were able to interact and meet other people from around the world. There were people there from Australia. There were people there from other parts of Africa. There were people there from other parts of not just Palestine, but other parts of the world in terms of South America. There's some folks there from South America. And all of these brigades had communicated that we wanted to do some type of entertainment dedication, right? So some people wrote songs and they performed it with their brigade at this party, this ICAP party, if you will, to celebrate the 65th anniversary. Our brigade decided that we wanted to translate a poem by Asada Shakur. And they were able to get somebody who spoke Spanish in the brigade to not only read it, but while they were reading it, they were on stage holding up flags. And I'll show you a picture of that in just a moment. One of the most beautiful things that I ever witnessed. I was so proud to be a part of that. But I wanted to show you this table here because you always hear us talking about political education. So one of the things that we were able to do on this brigade is, if we were a part of an organization or not, if we wanted to bring political education, they encouraged us to bring it in our suitcases. And then we had a Venceremos table at this ICAP 65th party. So people could come up, they could pick up books, they could take pictures of the books. We made it clear that they couldn't purchase anything or take anything off the table, but we had all kind of organizational paraphernalia. We had books by some of the brigadistas that they really wanted to share. And we just had an opportunity to talk to people and engage. And behind the table, you can see a little part of it. Behind the table, we all had our flags. So we had the red, black, and green flag for our African folks. We had the American Indian movement flag, the AIM flag, and then we also had our Palestinian flag, right? And again, this brigade was the first of its kind that focused on African, indigenous, and Palestinian folks. So just super, super cool. Not only to be a part of something that was groundbreaking and trend setting, but also to be able to have that representation of all of us. And so again, we always talk about political education. Boom, there it is right there. Okay. I also just want to highlight again, yet another example of a mural that was actually at a campsite that we went to in Matanzas. And the campsite, I don't know if you can see it, but on the wall, it says Revolucion. That's what it says. And these are like, not bricks, it's like marble that they've painted over, and it just shows you like what that looks like, what a revolution looks like, right? And so again, I ask you, if that's like such a bad thing, then why hasn't that wall been defaced by now? Why hasn't it had graffiti on it? Why is it still intact? Why haven't they painted over it? I would just ask you to think about that, because if you're not careful and people who don't know what they're talking about are talking to you, if you believe that propaganda and you don't see these images for yourself, especially if you don't get to go to Cuba, you'll never really know what's out there, right? Just reminding you all, there are no insurance companies there, so there's no way for you to be exploited. If you have a car accident, you're both supposed to call the police. The police make the final decision. If you don't agree, you take it to the courts. But there's no middle person who can collect your money just because this harmful thing happened to you. There's no middle person who can collect your money. And may we remind you all that because education is free, everybody on the island is educated. Everybody on the island knows how to read. Everybody on the island knows how to write. Everybody on the island has some type of foundational understanding of how their education is very much contributed to the economics and the development of that island's profit. Everybody is clear about that. This is why it's so important not to miss work. This was from a tour that we took when we were just walking through downtown Havana. And I couldn't help but notice just how beautiful some of the buildings were, even though they had a very heavy Spanish influence, in my opinion. It was really beautiful to kind of see that, because these buildings are beautiful. And the fact that they're still intact just speaks to the kind of architectural design and talent that was in place. I did not know that the responsable was taking this picture of me, so that's why I made it small, because it's not a good picture. But I'm there. Here I am in the street, just kind of listening to one of the tour guides who was speaking to us. Not one of my better pictures, but I wanted you to still have it. So there you go. Okay. All right. All right. Now we can move on. Okay. So moving right along. All right. So we're still on the educational conversation. And again, there's that QR code. Please, please, please scan it. The VB can use your help and your support. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to remind you all, the material aid bags that we brought, we weren't just asked to bring office supplies or even medical supplies. We were also asked to bring food, okay? So, it's important to mention that, because some of the comrades were able to package up pasta so that it didn't break during the transport. We were able to bring rice, beans, all kinds of stuff. And that's important too, because not every providence or municipal will have enough items to be distributed out to all the families. And that is how they distributed out our material aid, which was great. They were able to take the items and distribute them out. And one thing I loved about our material aid was all 40 of us were asked to bring a second bag. So that was 40 bags that we were able to leave in Cuba. And even after the bags have been emptied, now people can use those bags. Like, how cool is that to be able to say that you were a part of something like that? How cool is that, right? So I want us to think about that, but I also want us to think about how there's not as much restriction when it comes to providing for the community, because I think the government in Cuba understands that everything that is done has to be from a preventative measure. And as long as you can justify why you're doing it to benefit the mass number of people, then in most cases, it'll be supported and you'll be able to do what you need to do. What I mean by that is, if you wanted to open up a restaurant, turn your house into a restaurant, or maybe open up a small store so that you could generate revenue, you are encouraged to do that. People there are taught they are taught how to have a green thumb. They're taught how to plant their food. There's encouragement behind that, where I did pass several community gardens that were accessible to all the people in that municipal and in that province, right? And again, there's this understanding that, it's not, my papaya, it's not my guava, like this is for all of us. So let's make sure that we're rationing out carefully. They had systems in place to make sure that people weren't taking more than they needed to. I also want to note that in downtown Havana, I passed an aquarium. We couldn't go in it, but I thought that was really cool that that was an option where you could go see the aquarium if you wanted to. So I'm just trying to help you all see, like, there's a pretty good quality of life. The blockade has been a horrible, terrible situation, and we need to lift it and do something about that. But I also don't want you all to think that, people are just starving and struggling in Cuba, because that's not what I saw. I saw people who were in love. I saw people who generated love. I saw resilience. I saw revolution. I saw revolutionary love. That's what I saw. I saw admiration. I saw ambiguousness. I saw those things, right? So, like, we just kind of have to frame that. And this is why we say you should go. And if you can't go, at least watch this more than once and watch the other two, so that you can at least get a better idea of what's out there. Because the world it's out there, but you have to see it for yourself. You can't rely on propaganda to tell you what's going on. Otherwise, you won't be able to trust anything. I also want to note that one of the biggest ways that we can see revolution and organization taking place on the island is one of the ways that I would say Cuba deals with patriarchy and sexism and toxic masculinity, is the fact that all non-male people belong to the organization, the Women's Federation of Cuba. They all belong to that organization. So I was trying to get someone's information who was a part of that organization, because as a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we wanted to collect certain organization contacts so that we could connect with them, invite them to speak at PAW, Pan African Women's Day, whatever that may be. Even on the panel for African Liberation Day, we wanted them to have the option to do that. And we went to the ICAP celebration at the camp that I told you about in Matanzas, and I forgot to ask people, are you a member? And I was like, oh man, I forgot. But then I remembered that the tour guide said any non-male person on the island is a member, and I said to myself, I wonder if the people at our lodging place, I wonder if they're members. And I was trying to fumble with how to ask the question in Spanish, and she was like, "See, yeah, I'm a member." And I was like, "Dope! That is so cool. May I have your contact information?" And then I was trying to remember how to say email, and she was like, "Email." And I was like, see, put up the air. Can I have? Yes, yes, see. So my point is, like, that's one of the ways they do that, you all, because they are actively organizing and resisting against it. And I'll be able to get in contact with her and to learn just how frequent the meetings are, what's the expectation of the meetings, what are some of the action items that have been able to be accomplished, like all of that. And so I just thought that was really cool, and I really wanted to share that. I also just wanted to highlight a couple of images here. So you see in the bottom left, we see the what are these called? The bumper stickers, right? We see the bumper stickers. So you see the Zionism is terrorism. You might even see the Palestinian flag here, and then of course the Cuban flag, and there's a few other things. Cubana here, the sticker. So I just wanted to show this, you all, because at our camp in Matanzas, when you walked into the cafeteria, there were all these bumper stickers that have been placed on the walls, again, by people from different brigades who had brought different bumper stickers there to share, right? Excuse me. So it's important to note this, because again, like, when we're not clear about the connection, right? When we're not clear about the connection, how we're all fighting the same oppressor, Like, this is what that looks like. How many of you would have assumed that you would see like Palestinian solidarity stuff in Matanzas, Cuba? How many of you would have thought that? Probably not, right? But that's great that we do see it, because that means Cuba understands that their role is in supporting Palestinians to get their land back, right? I froze up, so I'm gonna say that again. It's really cool that we see these bumper stickers, because that means that Cuba understands their role in supporting Palestinians to get their land back, right? And this is also why we understand that, Cuba made it very possible, because they wanted Angola to have military and political support. This is why they sent warriors and troops over to help fight in that war. They did the same thing in Azania in South Africa, right? They did the same thing in Guinea-Bissau. They did the same thing in Mozambique. They did the same thing in the Congo, right? This is not by accident, you all. Cuba has always, always, always been interested in helping Africans achieve independence. This is also why Cubans have sent teachers to other countries, because they're also trying to help with the educational disparity. That I just told you that they sent the antiviral treatments because they're trying to help with the medical disparity. I hope we're seeing the connection here. I hope we're seeing it, because this is really, really important when we break this all down and we really understand this. This is an image I told you about when they were giving the Asada Shakur poem in Spanish. So this is some of my brigadistas on stage giving that poem. And then I wanted to just highlight this image here on the bottom right. So this is a poster board, like a wall, if you will, a bulletin board. That's what it is, a bulletin board that we saw at one of the schools that we went to. And again, like, you see the picture of Che right there. So like these, children, right, are walking past this bulletin board every day, seeing this picture of Che, and they're learning about Che in school. They're learning about patriarchal and toxic masculinity and sexism in school. Their curriculum is literally designed to be anti-patriarchal, right? They're learning about LGBTQIA issues in school. The curriculum is embedded in that on the island, you all. So whatever school they go to, they're going to learn how to be allies against homophobia and transphobia and even xenophobia. And they're going to learn how to be allies where they're not enforcing patriarchal values, where they're not enforcing sexist values, toxic masculinity values. And that shows, because then you can see if they're young children and they're being instilled and exposed to those things, then they become older adults. And this is why they handle themselves differently than some of the folks you and I interact with on a day-to-day basis, not on Cuban soil, and who have not been trained and educated in the same way, right? Okay, so this image here, this is one of the most beautiful statues I've ever seen. So let me tell you the story. So the tour guide was explaining to us that this statue is a non-male person, woman identifying, who's on this rooster, and she's holding forks in her hands. And I know you can't see the forks, but this was so interesting to me, the way they explained it. They basically were saying the artist was trying to make a mockery, if you will, of patriarchs. So holding the forks as a way of representing her homebody, feminine tendencies, but she's on the rooster. Oh, I froze up. Oh, I froze up. Am I back? Okay. So the artist was trying to make a mockery of patriarchy by this woman on the rooster holding the forks, but she's on a rooster, which is identified as a male animal. The chicken is a female. The rooster is a male. So her using the rooster to literally crush through and resist the patriarch by holding the forks, also as a way to steer the rooster and to regain control, you all. So I don't know if that, is making sense the way I'm saying it, but I thought that was extremely profound when they explained that to us. And I thought it was extremely revolutionary. Okay, and then last but not least, I want to talk about the social life. Okay, so, we had a chance to go to a ballet while we were there, which was absolutely amazing. Every park that I passed, there were no unhoused people, but I also noted that even if it were late at night, sometimes we wouldn't leave dinner until 8, 9:30 at night. And the place that we were eating dinner at was probably 2 blocks away from where we were staying. So some of us didn't want to wait for the bus. Some of us walked collectively, because everything is collective, as a group back to the place we were staying at. And we would pass parks on the way. And I would see people sitting in the park at 9:30 at night. And I'm like, what are these people doing out so late? It's dangerous, but it's not dangerous, not there. Because the assumption is you are among people who love and care for you. Not to say that you're not going to have problems, but again, like the lifting of capitalism, it does take away a lot of problems. It does. And I really encourage you to think about that. It does. When you are living in a humane environment, you're not going to practice being inhumane as much. You're not, because you just don't need to behave that way. I already told you that they didn't have programs in place to exploit people based on our harm and our trauma. So you didn't have insurance agencies. You don't have tow trucks. You don't have these kind of programs and facilities in place that make profit off of people in pain. You don't have that there. So because of that, that would affect the crime. That would affect the assault rates. That would have rates. That would affect all of that, right? So this is why people feel safe being at the park at 9:30 at night and holding hands and giggling and being in love and doing all the things that I saw while I was there. Right? This is where all of that is coming from. I want to speak to the unhoused situation really quick before I close this slide out and talk about these photos quickly. The unhouselessness rates there, you all, very clear. The only reason a person of Cuban descent would be unhoused is if they are choosing to be unhoused. Let me say that again. The only reason a Cuban person would be unhoused is because they are choosing to be unhoused. There are too many resources in place. They even told us that they had a foster home for orphans who unfortunately parents had passed away. The orphans would then grow up in this house, and when they turned 18, you all, there was a house waiting for them. There was a house waiting for the orphans. And I asked the tour guide, I said, how many people are still renting? Because when I read the Cuban Revolution, the Women's Federation of Cuban Revolution by Vilma Espin and Fidel Castro, they were saying that a percentage of a person's income went to rent, or I thought it went to housing expenses. I classified it as rent, but it really was just housing expenses. And at the time that that book was written, it was saying that it was 10% of that person's income that would go to housing expenses. And he told me, I don't know how to answer your question because 95% of people on the island own their houses. They own them. So we don't even have a large percentage of people who are renting. And I was like, what? It's amazing to me. It's absolutely amazing. So it's important for us to think about that. I have the picture there of the bus stop. Like even the painting on the bus stop is Revolution, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. The money here, you see Che's face on the money. Again, if he's such a bad person, why is that being printed on the money, right? Like we need to think about that. And then of course this beautiful image here that you see in the town squares. We're crossing the street. And then these were just some statues that of pictures we took from the Casa de Africana, the African Museum House that we went to. Before I turn it back to Baba Ajamu, I'll just say one of the best things I learned about being at that museum is that a lot of African women, when they went to work for European oppressors, they would use their money that they got because they weren't necessarily enslaved to not get profit. They were earning profit to clean the houses and, you know, tend to the children. And they would use that money to pay for the freedom of their partners and their family. So I just want to close by saying, you have no idea what an African woman has done for you. And I'm not just saying that because you're African. I'm saying that African women are the cradle of civilization. So the next time you consider disrespecting an African woman, you should think twice because it's quite possible that her sacrifices benefited you and your family in some way, shape, or form. Never forget that. Thank you. And with that, I appreciate you all, and I will give the floor to Baba Jamu.
All right, there you have it, you all. That dirty word, socialism, everything Shakur talked about, socialism. So come back next week so you can learn more about how Cuba embraces socialism. We're talking about people in love on the streets, people living their life without a lot of resources. This is what we want to build. And if you don't want to build it, then I suggest therapy and medication. So you should join us next week, Sunday, February 15th, for Shakura's final installment of the report back of her trip entitled Cuba Sí, Bloqueo No, Cuba Yes, the blockade no. So please let people know a week from today, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, she will be concluding this very informative presentation. I hope that you watch all three of her presentations. I hope that you watch the one I did last week on my trip to Azania, or what they call by the colonial name South Africa. I hope that you watch all of these. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the red and white QR code, which is APRP programs, as well as the Forward Ever shop. So go ahead and check those out. Buy clothes that support the African Revolution. And then also, if you're here in the Sacramento area, come to our community self-defense classes every Thursday night, 6 to 8 p.m. our time here, Pacific time. The address is 2775 Cottage, like cottage cheese, Cottage Way, Unit 15. Let some people know, even if you're not here in this area, let people know. We should be building programs like this everywhere. You are not safe. And if you think you are, then again, I recommend therapy and medication. Also, we have the QR codes there, the green and white one, to donate to Vincent Ramos Brigade, to continue to build this consciousness about supporting the Cuban Revolution. So we want to definitely ask you to donate what you can to that. We want you to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party at AAPRP-intl.org. Go there to do that. The QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one, supports our comrade work on the ground in Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, eventually the Sahel region, to bring revolutionary literature to our people. We are organizing, y'all, and we need revolutionary literature in order to have ideological training taking place. So if you become a monthly sponsor there, clicking on that QR code, you can help us do that. So please do that. And then finally, my book in the upper right. We don't have the QR code on this slide, but we'll have it next week. A guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. A guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. It's only $8. You can type that in because the QR code's not there this week, but you can type it in and go ahead and purchase it. It's only $8. Call your local library, get them to order copies. Call your bookstore, have them order copies. 100% of the proceeds go towards anti-fascist work. We are doing anti-fascist work, continuing to do that. I was out there with the high school students. I mentioned that, I think, last week. Threw myself in front of several cars that were trying to run them over. We need resources. So when you buy the book, that's how we get them. So help us do this work. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day. I don't care what they told you. We are winning.